Hello, this is McD the Beast, and this is McD Sports 4 coming to you today with my top 25 for Week 5 of the 2022 college football season. Before I continue, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe to your channel. Really appreciate you do that. Really trying to grow the channel. Let's go ahead and do that. Uh, Week 4 was very exciting. A lot of close games, a lot of fun matchups. We saw some big things happen. So basically, what I'm going to do is show you my top 25 here for Week 5. I'll go over every team a little bit. Then at the end, I'll tell you why I dropped out some teams that just missed the line, basically, and get out of here. So let's get into it. We'll go 25 through 1. Number 25 is Texas. I still kept Texas in the top 25 because I still think that performance against Alabama proved to me that I still think they're a top 25 team. But that was a bad loss to Texas Tech. Give Texas Tech credit, though. They are definitely better than what I thought they were going to be this season. So give them credit. I dropped Texas 8 spots. I put them in up at 25. I still think they're a top 25 team, but very disappointing loss for Texas. I believe 2 weeks from now you do get the Red River Shootout against Oklahoma. More on that in a second. But overall, and I'm going to say this about the Big 12 in general. Big 12, I think, is wide open. I still like two teams that I have a bit higher up in my rankings to win that conference, but it could be a plethora of teams who could win that conference. So number 25, Texas. Number 24, Pittsburgh. I put Pitt back into my top 25. They were initially in it. They lost to Tennessee. They were out of it for a few weeks. I put them back in it. They beat Rhode Island. Wasn't overly impressive, but overall, I mean, the only loss is to um a really good Tennessee team by a touchdown in overtime. And I mean that West Virginia win is looking a little bit better. So Pitt up at 24, I think they deserve to be back in the top 25. So Pitt up at 24, and up at 23, Wake Forest. That was a tough loss for Wake Forest there against Clemson. I still think they're a top 25 team. I only dropped them 2 spots. You look at Wake Forest; they don't have a defense. I thought their game plan was smart against Clemson, but I do think that if Clemson and Wake Forest face each other on neutral field 10 times, that'll be five. Each team will win 5 and lose 5. So, but unfortunately, Wake Forest lost. I still think their goals are they still can hit all their goals, making a New Year's Six bowl, stuff like that. Possibly even winning the ACC. We'll see what happens with Clemson down the stretch. But I dropped Wake Forest down 2 spots. Number 23, Wake Forest. Number 22, BYU. Wyoming is kind of a rugged team. BYU beat Wyoming 38-24. I mean, I guess I'll move BYU up a few spots. The Oregon loss is looking a little bit better, even though it was a blowout loss. And I still think BYU is a top 25 team. So I moved BYU up 3 spots, number 22. And then number 21, Syracuse. Uh, they were not previously ranked. This is the first time they've been in my top 25 all season. Listen, do I think Syracuse is a New Year's Six bowl team? No. Do I think they can make a decent bowl though? Yes. And if you look at who they beat, they've beaten some Power Five teams. They really have. You look at Purdue. You go ahead. You look at uh, Virginia this past week. I know it was sloppy, but you beat them. You beat. I believe it was Boston College who you beat was the other team. I forget who else you beat. I know you beat another Power Five team there, but I've been pretty impressed with Syracuse so far this year. Um, they've been, as I said, they've beat some Power Five teams this season, and yeah, number 21. Oh, it was Louisville. Louisville was the other team they beat. And Louisville just blew out South Florida. So, um, yeah, number 21 Syracuse. I think they're a top 25 team. I really do. So number 21 Syracuse. Number 20 Texas A&M. Welcome back to the top 25, Texas A&M. You beat Arkansas. Now, granted, you should have lost that game, in my opinion. That was kind of that was the first time I've ever seen a kick go off the very top of the upright. That was weird, but Texas A&M. That loss to App State, I still think hurts. Texas A&M big time in my opinion. And overall, if you look at a team, the roster it's just too good not to keep out of the top 25 with just one loss. They have Mississippi State this upcoming week. We'll see what they do against them. But number 20, Texas A&M, and they did beat a team that was actually ranked number 20 in my poll this past week. Number 19, Florida State. They blew out Boston College. Listen, Florida State's undefeated. Say what you want about them. I think Boston College, to be honest, is probably the worst team in the ACC. I know some people are going to say Georgia Tech. I hope those two teams play and we can figure out who's the worst team. But I like what I'm seeing from Florida State this year. I do. I was high on them coming into this season. I did not have them in my top 25 in the preseason top 25, but I did say it was a team I did consider. And they're proving me right. Number 19, Florida State moved them up 4 spots. Number 18, Washington. A lot of people picked Washington in the poll last week. I was almost there, but I just kept them out of it. They blew out Stanford on the road. And that Michigan State win is not looking as good as it did last week. But they are a good team. They will contend in that Pac-12. And remember, the Pac-12 is just the 2 top teams. I don't know. I believe they still get Oregon because of the rivalry. But number 18, Washington. I think they deserve to be in the top 25. And they were actually number 18 in the AP last week. So I'm probably a week behind where people think Washington should be. So number 18, Washington. Number 17, Oklahoma. Very disappointing loss to Kansas State. Let's give Chris Klieman credit, though. This team lost to Kansas State. They lost to Tulane in last week in shocking fashion, and they turned around and beat Oklahoma. That says a lot about Chris Klieman, what he's building there at Kansas State. And listen, he's 3-1 against Oklahoma. He is 3-1 against Oklahoma since he's been there. So if I'm Kansas State, I think you made the right hire there in Chris Klieman. I think this just proves it. Oklahoma, I told you guys they weren't the 6th best team in the country. I had them at number 10 going into this past week. I dropped them 7 spots. I still think they're a top 25 team. But as I said earlier when I talked about Texas, the Big 12 is wide open. So I honestly think you could see a 6-3 team in the Big 12 championship game. I think a lot of these teams are just going to beat up on each other in the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12. If you look at the Big 12, it's legit 10 deep in my opinion. I think all 10 teams have a chance to win the Big 12. So, in my opinion, you look at Oklahoma. I dropped them 7 spots. I might be actually being a little bit too kind, to be honest with you, but um, I was not surprised that they lost the game. Because I did have Kansas State covering. I did thought Oklahoma will find a way to win at the end, but Oklahoma, a little bit, I told you so. 17th best team in the country. Number 16, Penn State. I didn't move them. Kind of a sleepy performance against Central Michigan, coming off a big road win against Auburn. Listen, you have Minnesota and Michigan coming up on your schedule. I believe I want to say you have Indiana this week, if I'm not mistaken. But Penn State, in my opinion, I think they're a top 15-ish team. We'll see what they do against Indiana. Indiana team that I think is a big 3-1 fraud, if you want my opinion, and that was proven this past week against Cincinnati. So I'm just gonna go ahead keep Penn State at 16, up to 16 Penn State, and also that win against Auburn. Auburn did win against Mizzou, but they should have lost that game in my opinion. Number 15, Oregon. Very impressive win for Oregon, down 44-32, coming back and getting a big victory there. 44-41 the final against Washington State. Very big time victory there for Dan Lanning. Big time comeback. I think that's a great win for Oregon against a Washington State team that I do think will win 8-9 games this year. So a very impressive win, especially with the struggles Oregon has had in past years against Washington State, especially up in Pullman. But Oregon, I mean, outside of the Georgia performance, if you take away the Georgia performance, they've been 2 very good teams in my opinion. They've been a team that's in my top 25, and BYU at number 22, and they beat Washington State, which is a borderline top 25 team. So I think Oregon's a top 15-ish team, so I moved them up right up to number 15, 4 spots. Number 15, Oregon. Number 14, Ole Miss. I'm just gonna be honest with saying this. I feel like Ole Miss outside Georgia Tech has been a bit underwhelming. Um, they let Tulsa kind of get back into that game a little bit. I think Ole Miss. I still think they're a top 25 team. They have a big game against Kentucky this Saturday. We'll see what happens there, but I moved you guys down 2 spots. I just think you guys been a little bit underwhelming. Number 14, Ole Miss. Number 13, Utah. Utah, pretty impressive win against Arizona State. I know Arizona State's kind of a dumpster fire right now because they're running out interim head coach. Herm Edwards got fired. Kind of with everything going on down there with the NCAA investigation and how the team is just not that good of a team. Um, but Utah, they got the job done. I still think they're a top 15-ish team at worst, and they have that big game against Southern Cal in a few weeks. That's gonna be a huge game there in the Pac-12. So Utah number 13, number 12, NC State. NC State beat UConn 41-10. Kind of just an average game from NC State. I moved you guys up 1 spot. I mean, you guys get Clemson this week on the road. That's going to be a huge tax for NC State. We'll see what happens there. I think that is kind of your game of the week, I would think. Clemson versus NC State, unless you want to go with the Big 12 matchup. But NC State, number 12, number 11, Minnesota. I was high on Minnesota. I told you guys I think Minnesota is clearly the best team in the Big Ten West, and it looks like they are by far the best team in the Big Ten West. I mean, they do have to go on the road against Penn State, and that is actually the whiteout game for Penn State this year. It's not Ohio State; it's actually Minnesota this year, which is a bit interesting. And I do think Iowa is kind of still worth something. Um, so, but I think Minnesota's a top 15 team. I really do. I think they have a good shot going at worst 10-2 if you look at that schedule. I think they're clearly better than Wisconsin. I think they're better than every other team in the Big Ten West. I think Iowa is probably the closest team to Minnesota in the Big Ten West. And then outside of the Penn State game, you look at their schedule. They beat the other team in the Big Ten East that they might have struggled against. Very convincingly, I might add, 34-7 over Michigan State. So this past weekend, so I have Minnesota number 11. I moved them up 3 spots. Now the top 10. Number 10, Oklahoma State. They had a bye this week. I moved you guys down 1 spot. Kind of just how the teams played, how some of these teams played. I could have kept you at 9, but I moved you guys down 1 spot. Big game against Baylor coming up this Saturday. Either that game or the Clemson NC State game is your game of the week there. But I believe in Oklahoma State. I think it's between them and Baylor who's going to win the Big 12, in my opinion, still. Even though I do think that it is a very real possibility that other teams could get into the Big 12 championship game just because of how deep the Big 12 looks. Because I think you have a bunch of good teams in the Big 12. But number 10, Oklahoma State. Number 9, Kentucky. Very disappointing performance against Northern Illinois. If you're a top 10 team, you got to do better than 31-23. Against a good Northern Illinois team, don't get me wrong, they're going to do good, well in MAC play and could very well win the MAC. But Kentucky, in my opinion, I was just disappointed. Maybe you're looking ahead to Ole Miss. I don't know. They face Ole Miss next week. Kentucky does, and that's a big matchup as well. There, in my opinion, but I do think that the ACC matchup and the Big 12 matchup are bigger than that matchup. But Kentucky, I moved Kentucky down 2 spots to number 9. Number 8, Clemson. I moved Clemson up 3 spots. Listen, going on the road being Wake Forest is impressive. Defensively, I do think Clemson secondary is not that good. I know they were a bit banged up there, but so many pass interference calls, so many times they got beaten coverage there. Clemson secondary, I think that's the one really, really weak part of this team. Offensively, Clemson finally looked good, but it was against a bad Wake Forest defense. I moved Clemson up 3 spots. I don't think they're a top 5 team. I don't. I do think they are a top 10 team. I could buy into that now because originally I didn't think they were a top 10 team really, but I'll buy into that they're a top 10 team. Number 8, Clemson. Number 7, Baylor. I was impressed with Baylor. Baylor was actually an underdog going on the road against Iowa State, and Iowa State's a good team. They will definitely compete in the Big 12 this year, but I was very impressed with Baylor going on the road. I know they kind of let Iowa State creep back in that game a little bit, but it was 31-14 at one point in Baylor's favor. They clearly looked like the better team on the field, in my opinion. I moved Baylor up one spot. They have a big game against Oklahoma State, as I said, this Saturday. That game is at noon on ABC, if I'm not mistaken. But I like Baylor a lot. I think they should be the favorite to win the Big 12, and they're the seventh best team in the country. And then my top 6 did not change, so we'll just talk about number 6 real quick. Tennessee, yeah, I know they beat a team that was in my top 25 this past week, and number 24, Florida. I get that they kind of let Florida hang around that game and kind of made it a little bit too interesting for me. Um, but it is a big win. It's the first. It's only the second time you've beat Florida in 17 years, if I'm not mistaken, or 18 years. It is a big win. Tennessee, big game on the road against LSU. To me, you gotta win that game. Then I think you get a bye, and then you get Alabama. So hopefully you can beat LSU. I think LSU is a top 35-ish team, and I do think that you're gonna get LSU's best shot. But Tennessee, in my opinion, um, I was pretty impressed. I said I've been high on them all season. They haven't proven me wrong so far. Number 6, Tennessee. And then, as I said, my top 5 stays the same. Number 5, USC. I'm going to show Oregon State some love here. I came on here with my college football picks and said I do not see why the spread is only 5.5. I thought USC would run away with this one because I didn't think Oregon State has the players to really go up against this USC offense. And boy, was I wrong. USC struggled throughout this game. They did at the end of the day, though. They did go on the road in a tough environment and got a win 17-14 over Oregon State. And I know USC has had struggles up there when they've had travel to Oregon State. That's kind of been that one team in the Pac-12 that USC has had troubles going on the road against. That you would expect, but USC, in my opinion, I still think they're the 5th best team in the country. To get Arizona State, they should beat them pretty easily. That game against Utah is going to be huge in a few weeks, but number 5, USC. Number 4, Michigan. I'm gonna spend some time talking about my team here. I'm a Maryland Terps fan. Um, but let me talk about Michigan real quick. Michigan is not the same team that they were last year. I still think they're a top 5 team though. The reason why I still think that is because I actually think they face a lot better Maryland team than what I expected. A lot better Maryland team than what a lot of people expected. Ladies and gentlemen, Maryland will go 9-3 if they play like they did yesterday throughout the rest of the season. Let me be very clear in saying that. Outside of Ohio State, maybe they lose another game somewhere else. Maybe the ball doesn't bounce their way a few times and they get a little bit unlucky. But I expect Maryland, if they play like they did, they could easily go 9-3 in my opinion. Um, I think Michigan faced a lot better Maryland team than what anybody expected. And I think that's why the score is 34-27. And remember, Maryland gifted them a free touchdown in the first 10 seconds. Um, so if it wasn't for that open kickoff fumble and then the first play is a touchdown, um, that game would have went to overtime, and who knows what would have happened. Michigan, in my opinion, I still think they're a top 5 team. But I think they get Iowa this upcoming week. To me, that's a 75-25 game. Michigan should win that. But I do think that game could be a little bit closer. And I'll speak about Iowa a little bit later here. Number 3, Alabama. You beat Vandy 55-3. You did what you were supposed to do. You get Arkansas next week on the road. Tough environment. But I think Alabama's going to take care of business against Arkansas. Number 2, Ohio State. Um, you blew out Wisconsin 52-21. This game was over by the end of the first quarter. Um, Ohio State looks like, besides number 1, even though number 1 did struggle a lot. And let me tell you something. 5 and 6, USC and Tennessee is very close for me. Michigan, I think, should be a little bit ahead of USC. Um, even though Michigan's only real opponent is Maryland, because I still think I would take Michigan over USC because of the lines of scrimmage. Alabama, I think is clearly the third best team in the country. 1 and 2 got a lot closer for me. Um, I'll talk as I was saying. Ohio State blew out Wisconsin. It wasn't even really a game. It was over by the first quarter. This offense looks like the best offense in the country for Ohio State. Defensively, they look a lot better. So, number 2, Ohio State. And then number 1, Georgia. Can we give some credit to Kent State? Kent State is a team that, to believe it or not, I actually considered for a moment to put them in the top 25 just because they scored 22 points on Georgia. I'll say this, Sean. I've been saying this now in this YouTube channel now for a few years. Sean Lewis is building a good program there at Kent State, and they're a good MAC team, and they're going to be a good MAC team as long as Sean Lewis is the head coach. Georgia sleepwalked through that game, obviously, and if I'm a Georgia fan, I would be worried a little bit. You get Missouri this upcoming week, a horrible Missouri team. I think you'll beat them easily, but 1 and 2 got a lot closer for me. Because Georgia did look a bit vulnerable in that game. I mean, Ohio State, I think clearly has the best offense. I still think Georgia has the best defense, but um, I nothing really changed my top 6 because I wasn't like a definite in my mind and watching the games. I wasn't like, okay, these top 6 teams. Ohio State's clearly better than Georgia. Alabama's clearly better than Georgia. Michigan is clearly better than Alabama. That didn't really cross my mind, really. So that's why none of the 6 spots changed. But that's the top 25. Now the teams that I dropped out and the teams I consider, we always start with the teams I dropped out. Number 18 Miami last week, unranked this week. I didn't even watch the highlights. I just saw the box score. Losing to Middle Tennessee State by 2 touchdowns is unacceptable. Giving up 45 to Middle Tennessee State is unacceptable. And to be honest, Miami in general, that was unacceptable. Very bad performance all around. I didn't even watch the highlights, as I said, but I didn't need to. Um, Miami, you're gone. Arkansas. I told you guys about Arkansas. Didn't I say that Arkansas looks like a borderline top 25 team? They lost to Texas A&M. You could have said they should have won the game. You could have said that, but I think they were a borderline top 25 team. I dropped them out this week. They were number 20 last week. Goodbye. Number 22, North Carolina. I'm going to actually speak a little more about Notre Dame here than North Carolina. North Carolina's defense is horrible, as it was proven this past week against Notre Dame. They were number 22 in my pool. I dropped them out. Marcus Freeman needed that win, I think, badly. So good for him. He got that win. I did not have Notre Dame, in my opinion, is a borderline top 25 team. If this was a top 26, I would probably consider Notre Dame strongly for that spot. And then number 24, Florida. You're the 24th ranked team in the country, and you lost a game to a team that I think is better than you on the road. I get that. I will say this about Florida, and this is a criticism of Florida. Billy Napier was coaching like he was desperate. Going for a lot of 4th downs. He had a coaching blunder with that 2-point conversion. They should have just kicked the extra point to get to a 10-point game. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. I felt like it was a bit desperate. But since you're the 24th best team and you lost, well, not the 24th best team, but the 24th ranked team in my AP in my top 25, and you lost. I basically just dropped you guys out. But I do think Florida, if this was like a top 28 poll, I think I would put Florida probably somewhere in that top 20. I don't think Florida embarrassed themselves. I just think some coaching blunders and you lost to a better team. Teams I considered. We'll kick it off at the Kansas schools. Kansas is 4-0, but if you look at their schedule, I'm not really impressed. Their best win is against Duke. I get Duke was also 3-0, but I don't think Duke's gonna make a bowl game despite starting 3-0. I just don't. And I do think Kansas will win probably another few games, but I don't know. I think they're a top 30 team. I think you got to consider them and you pit them in if it's a top 30, but um. Yeah, I'm not riled by their resume. And Houston, and I told you guys, Houston is overrated, and they barely survived Rice 34-27. Kansas State, I know that's not listed here, but I'll talk about them real quick. Very impressive win. If Tulane did not lose to Southern Miss this weekend, they would have been in the top 25 over Pittsburgh. So, um, just take note of that. And Kansas State, a lot of people have them as a dark horse to win the Big 12, and it's looking like that could turn into a reality. So Kansas State, if this was a top 27, they would be ranked number 27. UCLA, they're 4-0. Now, granted, I think they're 4-0. They're the most fraudulent 4-0 team out there, but they are 4-0. Let's show them some love. That's a team I consider. TCU, they're 3-0. Good win against SMU. SMU is going to win some games in the American, so I'm not overly concerned about that only being an 8-point game. We'll see what TCU does in Big 12 play. We'll see what they do, but they're 3-0. I had to at least give them an honorable mention. So TCU 3-0, and then Iowa. Iowa's offense is waking up. I know it's against Nevada and Rutgers, but hey, you're scoring 27 points. This defense, I think, could be the second best defense in the country. So they have a big game against Michigan. I think they are a top 30-ish team. So let's give some love to Iowa. I know I've kind of dragged them through the mud, and I still think this offense is horrible. And their one loss is to an Iowa State team that's probably at worst a top 40-ish team. So I'm not over. I think Iowa's probably a team you got to go ahead and consider to be a top 25 team. And then any 3-1 group of 5 team. The group of 5 this year, I think, is kind of a slugfest. My pick with Air Force, I still stands. I still think Air Force is going to be that team at the end. But I think Cincinnati is going to be there as well. They had an impressive win against Indiana, a 3-0 Indiana team that I said it was fraudulent and it was proven. Western Kentucky lost to Indiana, but that's kind of the team out of the Conference USA. The Sun Belt, those teams are kind of just being up on each other. So any 3-1 group of 5 team you want to throw in there, I'll let you throw them in there. But I honestly don't think there's a group of 5 team that's in like at the minimum like the top 30. I don't think there's a group of 5 team at the minimum right now that's in the top 30. But that's those are the teams that I considered. That's my top 25. Comment down below, tell me your top 25. I always like hearing from you all. Thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. McD the Beast signing off.